everyone, and welcome to the sixth and final session in American English Live Series 16. We're so excited that each of you are here with us today. My name is Kate, and I'll be with you today along with my colleague behind the scenes, Heather, who will be the moderator helping answer your questions and responding to your comments during the session. Let's begin today with two wonderful audience comments from our most recent webinar, Target Language Use in the Classroom, Teaching Speaking Differently with Jane Borseva. Magdalene in Malaysia says, a very useful and informative session. I learned a few new things about how to carry out speaking activities using the target language. I enjoyed Never Have I Ever. And the public affairs section in Angola was joining us, which was great. And they wrote, the teacher community in Luanda, Angola found the session outstanding because target language helps students exercise their English language skills authentically. They will now start incorporating more activities in the classroom, encouraging target language. Wonderful, thank you to both of those commenters. We love to see our teacher participants like you actively engaged in professional development. So please continue to share your thoughts about our webinars by offering feedback through the end of session quiz form or by emailing your ideas to americanenglishwebinars@fhi360.org. We may feature one of your comments during the next session. Throughout Series 16, we have explored the themes of teaching about climate change in the EFL classroom and approaches for teaching a variety of core ELT topics. We hope you are able to use the practical ideas we've shared. So here's what to expect today. The session is about 60 minutes long. The presenter will present the material, and I will also ask questions and make comments. But we really hope to hear from you, our audience, so that we can address all your ideas and experiences. Please share your thoughts using the comments feature or chat box. And when our session comes to a close, you'll have an opportunity to receive a digital badge for your participation. At the end of the webinar, we'll share a link in the comments. Click on that link and complete a short quiz about today's session. You must answer 2 out of 3 multiple choice questions correctly. And once you've successfully done so, you can expect to get your badge via email within about a week. And before we begin, we wanted to let you know about one of our upcoming massive open online courses, English for Tourism Professionals. This free self-paced course is designed for high beginner and low intermediate English learners. Course participants will study the principles of the tourist profession, learn key vocabulary and grammar, and build confidence communicating in English language. Enrollment for this MOOC opens on April 10th, and you can visit the link being shared now to learn more. And we're thrilled to announce the presentation lineup for AE Live Webinar Series 17, which will begin on May 17th. We are going to explore topics related to critical thinking and ways to create inclusive learning environments. You can use the link being shared in the comments to receive reminders about Series 17 events. We can't wait to see you all there, and hello to SIUNAP teachers. Thanks for joining us. So now for today's webinar, drama-based activities to improve student confidence and motivation. This webinar will present a wealth of resources that teachers need to begin using drama in their EFL classrooms to improve student engagement and confidence, including practical, classroom-tested, and evidence-based approaches. Using improv and acting techniques in language instruction can seem daunting for teachers who are not familiar with these approaches or feel they are outside of their comfort zones or frivolous. In this workshop, taught by the authors of Drama in the Language Classroom, you will learn about fun, evidence-based practices that can be applied in any classroom setting. And now we're pleased to introduce our presenters, Dr. Carmela Romano-Gillette and Dr. Derek McNish. Carmela is a lecturer in the University of Michigan's English Language Institute. She earned a PhD in literacy education from Oakland University, a master's in TESOL from Arizona State University, and a BA in theater and English. She has taught English for over 25 years in multiple contexts, including adult education and community programs, corporate settings, tutoring, community colleges, and universities. Derek is an associate professor of theater at Michigan State University, a senior editor of the International Dialects of English Archive, and a certified teacher of Knight Thompson speech work. He earned a PhD from the University of Colorado Boulder and an MFA from Case Western Reserve University. He has taught drama-based English language courses at the University of Michigan's English Language Institute and MSU's English Language Center. Welcome, Carmela and Derek. It's wonderful to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Kate. And thank you to Heather, Brooke, Elena, Kara, and all the wonderful people who worked to produce this webinar. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming and welcome to our presentation. Today, we want to share with you a teaching approach to language learning that we have found to be both fun and effective. I'm Carmela.
Hi, everyone. I'm Derek.
So just to give you a little bit of background, about 10 years ago, Derek and I met when we were tasked with co-teaching an English language course together. As we worked together, we realized that our combination of expertise made for a great way to teach language. So we began to develop a teaching approach that built on what we were doing in our class. We call that approach performing fluency, and we will be sharing some of its key elements with you today.
So here is our plan. First, we will explore the benefits of performance activities in the language classroom. Then we will demonstrate how to use theater games and warm-ups for confidence and motivation. We will provide some tools for teaching improv for authentic language use, and we will share blank scenes for creative activities, for creative expression and paralinguistic communication, or the elements of communication that don't have to do with words. But first, we have a question for you. Do you think that your personality changes when you're speaking in different languages? And if so, in what ways?
Yeah, let us know, everyone. Do you think your personality changes when you use different languages? And let us know in what ways, if so. So I would say that when I speak Spanish, I feel a little more animated, a little more relaxed and connected to people. And when I speak English, sometimes I feel a little more strict or rigid. What about you, everybody? What do you think? Does your personality change at all when you use English or another second language? Let us know. And I see lots of people coming to us from all over the world, like Georgia, Mexico, Pakistan, many other countries. Thank you so much for joining. Let's see, Sonia says, yes, it happens all the time. I think I'm more talkative, maybe in a second language. Interesting. I'm much more extroverted when I speak English, from Fernando. And Diego also says he's more extroverted in English. Interesting. I think I'm kinder in English than in Spanish. Well, that's my opposite from Angie there. And and someone else says, yes, of course, because culture has an influence on our mood. Wonderful. Thanks, everyone, for sharing.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for those responses. So there is some research that suggests that we do take on or feel compelled sometimes to take on differences in our personalities when we use different languages. So we like to embrace this idea and think it can actually help language learners speak more freely and confidently. We prefer to think about this as a choice the learner can make. We compare it to the way an actor takes on a role when they change some aspects of their personalities to play a character. So we prefer to look at this as a choice the learner makes, just like an actor does. Our students have found that they feel less vulnerable when performing a slightly different identity that they have chosen. There's some freedom in that. So in other words, Rather than asking our students to follow a strict program for studying English, we invite our students to make choices and to have fun while learning language. This helps to motivate them and helps them build confidence in their language use.
So as Carmela mentioned earlier, our teaching approach is called performing fluency, and this is based on principles and practices from acting theory and training. We use the techniques that actors use when they are preparing to play a role in a show to help our students prepare to use English. So we have a quote that we would like to share. This is from a psychologist named Charles Schaefer. And the quote is, "We are never more fully alive, more completely ourselves, or more deeply engrossed in anything than when we are playing." And I love that quote so much because I think we don't allow ourselves to play, or we feel guilty about it sometimes. But the act of playing can have enormous benefits for language learners.
So let's talk some about performing fluency. Performing fluency is an educational philosophy centered on linguistic theory and acting theory. Students are encouraged to make choices about how they use the language and their learning of it. So in any given situation, we all use language and present ourselves differently to fit the context. In performing fluency, we ask students to behave like an actor and make choices about how to play a character and how they will be an English speaker.
For teachers, this approach helps to create a supportive community of learners. We recognize that support and connection are more important than control in the classroom. We work together to help students make good choices about their learning.
So there is some, and actually quite a bit of research that supports these ideas. And so we have built this approach on particular theoretical framework from a few different areas. So first of all, there's lots of evidence to support the idea that drama can be used for education. There's also a lot of research around the idea that learning, language, and culture and context are all inseparable. And so we need to find ways to bring that all together when we teach. And then finally, there are strong connections between language and identity. So thinking about how we change our personalities in different languages, this is a really important part of how we approach language learning. And so all of this leads to this concept of investment in motivation. So it's a student-centered approach that encourages students to take some control of their learning process, and it leads to more student motivation and interest in what they're learning. So that's the theory. How does it work in practice?
First, think of this as a pedagogical approach, not a couple of random activities to throw in here and there. We try to create a sustained learning environment. And the idea of playing a role is central. We try to help our students to make choices about how to do that.
And we take a deeper look at the ways we use language to achieve particular goals. Rather than just studying lists of vocabulary or that kind of thing, we're trying to use language in authentic ways. If we commit to the approach, cultural conversations will arise organically from the performance and from the reflection on that performance. So let's do a quick progress check. So far, we have talked about the benefits of performance activities in the language classroom and the theoretical framework that supports them. Let's move on to looking at how we use this approach. So I've got another question for you to consider. Do you get nervous when you are speaking in front of a group of people, especially when you're using a different language? Please let us know.
Yeah, let us know, everybody. Do you get nervous when you're speaking in front of another group of people, or especially when you're using another language that is not your first language? What do you think? I think for me, it kind of depends on the context. If it's a lot of people and it's a very formal setting, I get really nervous. If it's a smaller group setting and I know everybody, I might feel a little bit less nervous. So let us know. Let's see. Francis says sometimes. Leah says always. Eduardo says, actually, no, I'm a good speaker. Awesome. It depends on the years of experience everyone has. From Salvador, wonderful. Fernando doesn't get that nervous either. Doreen says sometimes, and Juana says, of course. Let's see, one more. Jutta says, I do not feel nervous if I use English, but I try to use another one, another language. All right. Oh, if he tries to use something else besides English, he's more nervous. All right. Thanks so much for sharing, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, we had some people, Eduardo and Fernando, that are not nervous, and I think that's amazing and wonderful. My next quote here is from Mark Twain, and he says there are two types of speakers: those who get nervous and those who are liars. And I don't mean to imply that anyone that says they're not nervous is a liar, but I would say that just being nervous is a very natural thing. And before I was a teacher, I was a performer. And in both of those roles, I have to do a lot of public speaking. And I still feel that kind of, experience. And I think that acknowledging that and helping our students develop strategies to move past it is important for learning. So theater games and warm-ups. We had a recent AE Live webinar that was really fascinating to watch. It was on task-based learning, and it made a really strong case that in order for significant learning to occur, we have to actively use language. We have to use it. We have to perform a task. We have to search for the right words and put them in some kind of order and then send them out into the universe. For good or for bad, we have to take that risk. And there's an element of public speaking. And for a lot of us, that can be terrifying, right?
Right. Sometimes. So fear is an example of what's called an affective filter. This is an obstacle to learning. Other examples of affective filters are things like anxiety, a lack of self-confidence, a lack of motivation, and a feeling of alienation. These obstacles can reduce a person's ability to learn an additional language. The affective filter hypothesis states that a person with high levels of affective filters can have difficulty with language acquisition.
So in practice, sometimes language learners are too scared to take a risk, scared of losing face, or maybe scared is too strong of a word, embarrassed or cautious. And that's understandable because a language classroom may be an environment where they are used to being corrected or criticized. And that's not a good mindset for learning. In theater and film, actors struggle with those same issues. So theater warm-ups and games, those are designed to reduce anxiety, to reward spontaneity, and to reduce self-censorship. For performers, the goal is something that we like to call relaxed readiness. And I think it's the same thing in sports too, that feeling of being prepared but not tense, not letting anxiety control you. And so in theater, we achieve that through games. If you can spend a little bit of time at the start of class helping students get into that state of mind, it can really pay off.
So all of the photos that you're seeing on our slides are from workshops that we've taught. And as you can see, our students tend to be older. I tend to be adults. So college students, graduate students, and other adults. Children already know how to play. Adults just have to be reminded. So in our experience, these games will be embraced by people of all ages. So why would we play theater games? Here are some benefits to playing games in the classroom. First of all, ensemble building. This is where we build a community that has trust and mutual support. Taking the time to create a learning community where risk-taking is expected and encouraged can lead to experiential learning.
Another benefit is class participation. Warm-ups help reinforce the idea that saving face is less important. Students in some cultures value group harmony, the belief that the group is more important than the individual, so they might see speaking in class as a selfish or unwelcome act. Games can help students feel that learning is a shared endeavor.
There's also practicing problem solving. Some games are problems that have to be solved using language or movement. Self-judgment and hesitation just isn't helpful in that case.
Also, focus. Games help people feel alert, awake, and clear-headed. For adults, it's usually coffee, but games do the trick just as well.
And you can also break the ice. Each game can afford opportunities to speak, listen, and connect physical gesture to expression. This warms students up in a fun way and gets them ready to practice more speaking and more throughout the class session.
And it's fun. So I think that it's time for us to actually look at a game. The one that we chose for you today is called Sound and Movement. And this is a game it's one game that has 3 variations that we'll share with you. I like to use this first variation when a group first meets, and then adapt it and build upon it once they know each other. So here's how this would work. If you are working in person, I would begin by asking everyone to stand in a circle, like you see in that image on your screen. I will say my name, and I will make a physical gesture that goes along with that. I will connect it to an activity that I like. Then everyone will repeat the name and gesture. And then the person next to me goes, and we repeat, and we go around the circle. And I'm sure that some of you have done this kind of thing before. So let's demo. I will begin, and then we'll go to Carmela, and maybe Kate will play with us as well. So my name is Derek, and I really like to run. So Derek.
And I'm Carmela, and I really like to read, so Carmela.
And my name is Kate, and I like to dance, so Kate.
Awesome. So another variation of that game, it can allow people to experience the spotlight of speaking alone, but without too much pressure. So for the next variation, what we would do is the same setup. Let's all stand in a circle. And then if I'm starting, I would point to a random person across from me in the circle. And then I'll make a sound, or I'll speak a gibberish word, a fake word that I make up. And at the same time, I'm going to do a silly random movement. The person that I pointed to has to immediately mimic that sound and movement, and then they will point to another person and create their own thing without thinking too much about it. It should bounce in unexpected ways around the circle. The sounds and movements that people make should be unpredictable and fun. And really the only way to do this wrong, and I really like to stress this at the beginning, the only way to do it wrong is by thinking too much. If you just respond, you're in good shape. But if you think too much, you'll self-censor. So I don't know, let's try it out. I'm going to, because we're online, I'm just going to establish an order and say, I'm going to send this to Kate, and then Kate can send it to whomever she likes. Okay, here we go. Gashmergerburger.
Gashmergerburger. Okay.
doo-ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-doo. And I'm going to send to Derek, boop, beep, boop.
Boop, beep, boop, boop. Great.
Silly, right?
So those are the first two variations, and let's go on to the third way we can do this.
So the third variation is called exaggeration circle. So again, we're standing in a circle, and the instructor usually will start us out with a phrase and a corresponding gesture. So for example, I might say, I'm hungry, and pat my stomach. So, something simple, something very real now. The next person in the circle must exaggerate that same thing slightly. So they could be a little bit louder, they could maybe add something to it. So I'm going to send that off to Derek.
I'm very hungry.
And then it would go to Kate.
I'm starving.
And this continues around the circle until everybody has exaggerated the phrase and the gesture a little bit.
So yeah, it can be a great way to explore nonverbal ways of expression. How do your physical gestures help to clarify meaning or exaggerate? Or it can be a vocabulary exercise as well. We suggest, or we have found, that it's best if you stay consistent when doing theater games. And what I mean by that is try to begin every day with a simple game, and then it will become a ritual. It will become something that people expect and look forward to. It's a lot easier to do something like this from the start than it is halfway through the semester to introduce it and keep it going. Also, student buy-in. If you play a game like Exaggeration Circle, and then afterwards, just take a moment to talk with students about what they experienced and what they benefited from it. What did they get out of it? Or even just, how do you feel now than you did before? Then it helps them understand the value of it, and it becomes part of a learning process.
And don't shy away from a little light competition. Keep the stakes low, but for some students, competition can be really motivational. Also, remember to do some side coaching. So side coaching is, giving encouraging feedback during the game, or maybe helping someone who's struggling a little bit, and also to celebrate when students are doing well.
These can be adapted for online work, as we discovered 2 years ago during the time that we shall not name. The most important thing is to establish a clear order of working. And there's one fun way to do it that I'll share with you. It's called complement circle. Establish an order by picking someone and giving them a compliment. And then that person has to pick someone else and compliment them, and so on and so forth. And that way, it establishes a working order, but it also makes people feel really good about themselves. So, for example, Kate, I love how engaging you are with all of the guests watching the webinar.
Thank you so much, Derek. And Carmela, I think that you have a wonderful smile.
Oh, thank you so much. And Derek, I love your tie.
Thank you. Thank you. So then we have an order for the online versions of the games.
So games like these help create an environment where people are encouraged to take risks, where success and failure are connected, and where learning is a shared endeavor.
These games can be adapted easily, and there are a lot of games to try available online. And we also recommend a book by Viola Spolin called Theater Games for the Classroom. And you'll find that information in our list of references.
So let's do another progress check. We've explored the benefits of performance activities, and now we have some theater games we can use in the classroom. How do you feel about playing theater games like these in your classroom? Let us know. Type your responses in the chat.
Yeah, let us know, everybody. And while you are responding to that, we have some wonderful comments from our participants. Marcel says, these are interesting activities in small classes. How do I adapt them in large classes? We'll get to that in just a moment. That's a very good question. But we have Nellie who says, I can already imagine the fun. Tomorrow I'll try it with my students. Wonderful. And Sam Sonko says, if learning is fun, it fosters engagement and motivation amongst the learners. And one more very nice one from Fernando. Another benefit of drama in the classroom is developing empathy. We can use drama games to indirectly send a message to our students. What a wonderful comment. So what do you think, Derek and Carmela? Are these activities, can you adapt them for large classes? And if so, how would you think about doing so?
Absolutely. I would say that they can be adapted in different ways. You could demonstrate with a small group of people and have others participate, supporting and watching, and then breaking up people into smaller groups to play these games. You could create little circles or little working groups. And I think that has been good. There are also other games that work really well with large groups. Things with sociometrics, where you're having people move through space based on their responses to a question. Like, I don't know, if you like dogs, go over there, and if you like cats, go over there, right? If it's a large group of people, but there's freedom to move, you could do that. But there's also like just small groups that could be made when people are together. These games can be played in that way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And a lot of other comments about how people love these ideas. From Hamar, from Anne, from Lulia, from Nellie, from Karen, from Isan, from Natalia. So thanks everyone for those wonderful comments.
Yes, thank you.
So part 3 is about improv. And for this, we have a quote from one of my favorite actors and comedians, Tina Fey, and she is an improv performer. And this quote is, "There are no mistakes, only opportunities." And that's kind of a philosophy to embrace when doing this sort of work. You know, the ability to learn through failure by taking a risk, that kind of thing should be celebrated. And that's central to working with improv. Okay, so what is improv? We are used to using role plays in classrooms, and that's pretty common, but they do have shortcomings. Usually we are giving students a short list of words that they need to use in very predictable, safe conversations. Improvisation, or improv, is more immersive, it's more challenging, and it's more versatile. It gives the speaker the chance for more authentic language use and gives students a greater voice in crafting the situation. It is definitely more learner-centered. Rather than navigating a path that has been clearly and carefully plotted by the instructor, students must respond truthfully in a world that they helped to create. Students aren't traveling from fixed point to fixed point, but they're using language to negotiate through a dynamic situation with changing variables.
So what does improv look like? Improv is a kind of theater that involves creating something spontaneously. There's no script, and the actors are making things up as they perform. That doesn't mean there's no preparation, though. There can be rules, and it's something that one can practice. Improv is a part of every actor training program that I'm aware of in the United States today. Actors, as with English language learners, must practice speaking spontaneously and truthfully in a variety of circumstances. Listening and responding are also important skills for actors and English learners. Because of its many benefits, improv is also used in education, personal development, team building, social work, and drama theory, just to name a few areas.
So here are a few tools that you can use. First, yes, and. Yes, and. This is a philosophy in improvisation. Participants should be in a mindset to support the people that they're working with and to build upon what they invent. And this means that each improv participant should accept their partner's contributions and then add to what they've been given. It establishes a judgment-free way of working. So there are no bad ideas. Another thing is that you don't have to be funny. In the United States, improv is considered a humorous form of entertainment. I like to go to improv shows, and they are usually funny, not always, but they're usually funny. In this context, there is no pressure to be funny. If it happens, let it be a happy accident.
And the nice thing about improv is there's a role for the audience as well. So anyone in the class that is not performing the scene is the audience. In large classes, it can sometimes be difficult to get all students involved regularly, and you might lose their attention. But with improv, it's engaging to watch because it depends on the audience for information and context. So for example, the first information provided about a scene is called the initiation. And this may include conditions such as a location, a relationship, or a profession. This can be provided by the instructor, but drawing the initiation from the rest of the class ensures greater investment. After the scene is performed, they can also discuss what they observed to add more meaning to the activity. This is particularly helpful in multi-level classes. You can decide based on level which students will perform and which will observe, but all students get to participate in some way.
So let's share an example of an improv activity that you can try. This first one is called Yes, and. And actually, we're going to ask you to play along with us in a moment. So fair warning. This introduces the idea of yes, and gives people an opportunity to try this out without too much pressure. So I would begin, if we are working in person, I would begin by creating two lines of students, line A and line B. And then we would have pairs come together, one person from line A and one person from line B, and they will just have a two-sentence conversation. Very simple, 2 sentences. Student A will begin the conversation, and they will make a decision about the scenario. They will do the initiation. Student B must respond by first saying yes, and then they invent the rest of the sentence. Student B cannot contradict the scenario that student A creates and has to support it and add to it. Okay, a 2-sentence scene. Student A begins, student B accepts what they're given and responds with yes, and. Shall we?
Let's show.
Okay. So I really like your sweater, and I was wondering if I could have it.
Yes, and I'm giving it to you happily.
Beautiful. It's simple, and she accepted what she was given.
Even though I really do want to keep my sweater.
Why don't you start one?
Derek, will you marry me?
Yes. And I hope that you have a lot of money. Kate, how about you start one and then Carmela will respond.
Carmela, that is such a cute dog you have there.
Yes, and she bites. Would you all like to try it? Come on, let's play. So if I started a scene, I might say, I'm sorry, but there's no way I can finish my assignment on time. Can I have an extension? How would you reply? Remember, you have to start with yes, and. So I'd like to see some of your responses in the chat.
Yes, please let us know, everybody. And yes, we have the slide here. So maybe your student says, I'm sorry, but there's no way I can finish my assignment on time. Can I have an extension? So even if you don't really want to give them an extension, what would you say for this exercise? Juan says yes, and you can also make a PowerPoint presentation. Very nice. Marcel is a little bit kinder and says, yes, I will try to help you in it. Okay, very, very nice of you. The folks at the language house say yes, and you can finish it next week. Wow, Jose Manuel, another one. I will help. Yes, and I will help you with some clues. Very nice. Yes, and you must be done by tomorrow, from Melanie. Yes, and you need to submit it as soon as possible, from Juan Jose. And Jazabeh says yes, and you have 2 more days. And yes, and you should do a great job if you have more time, from Ellie. Oh, and Katarine, yes, and you need to do extra homework. All right, thanks everyone.
Love it.
I can tell we have some experienced teachers in the room. Okay, so this activity can be adapted. You can, we'll talk more about some specific adaptations, but it could go from 2 sentences to 4. It could be set in a particular context based upon particular vocabulary you're looking to work on. But the next game that we want to play, improv game, is called One Sentence Story. This is a fun and low pressure, but creative group activity that requires active listening and mutual support. Students work together to improvise a story from start to finish. So here are the instructions. If we are working in person, I would have students sit in a circle, or I would just make sure that there is a clear order of who goes first and who goes next. The instructor begins by providing the first line to a story, such as, once upon a time, there was a girl named Isabella. Then the next person would contribute 1 full sentence that adds to the story, and so on and so on and so on. Sometimes we would have the circle, the story might go around the circle once, and the person who started it might finish it, or it might go around twice if there is a larger or a smaller group. So let's try this out, shall we? Who would like to go first? Kate, would you like to start us off on a story?
Sure, let me think. Let's see. One day, the old dog met the baby kitten.
And when they met each other, they talked about all of those things they had in common, even though the dog was old and the kitten was a baby.
They became best friends, and they made really smart investments, and they became very, very rich and lived happily ever after. Remember, there are no mistakes, only opportunities. Yeah, so this is a really fun game, and if you're working with a very advanced group, you could try playing 1-word story where everyone adds 1 word, and it follows the same pattern. You're still trying to tell a cohesive story. It works better with advanced learners because 1 wrong preposition can stop the story in its tracks. But if you're willing to pause and fix errors, I think that it can be a really fun and challenging game.
So here are some tips for using improv in your classroom. First of all, remember that improv activities need to adhere to the rule of yes and. Students must accept what they have been given and build on it. You might need to do some side coaching if students aren't following the rule and remind them that it has to be yes and. It can take some time for students to get used to these kinds of activities. So repetition is always helpful, both for understanding the rules of the game and for practicing the language. And this is a good time to remind students that they have permission not to be funny. Authentic is always much more important than funny.
I would encourage students to play act in these scenes, improv scenes. For example, if student A says, "It's so cold out today, can I have your coat?" Then it would make sense for suddenly student B to accept that it's cold and to become cold and to present that, accept the reality, and let that situation impact the way that language is used. I would also plan for all of these games to play a few rounds. It may take 1 or 2 failures before the students realize how much they have to focus on what other people are saying.
These activities can easily be adapted to meet specific curricular needs and your learning goals. So if, for example, you want to review terms that are related to English for academic purposes, tell students that all of their scenes must take place in a teacher's office. Or an instructor can provide a key vocabulary list and ask that students incorporate those words into their scenes. This is a game in which it is okay to pause and review vocabulary. Maybe even have someone write out some of the words that are spoken and review them after.
So these are some ways of using improv to engage students. Next, we're going to work on more complex texts and scenarios.
But first, a quick progress check. So we've explored the benefits of performance activities in the language classroom. We've talked about how to use theater games for warm-ups and for building confidence and motivation. And we've talked about the ways we use improv in the classroom for authentic language use. So we have another question for you. How do you teach the paralinguistic features of language? So those are the ways that we express meaning beyond the words themselves. Some examples of paralinguistic features are things like stress, volume, or intonation. So please share your ideas with us.
Yeah, let us know, everybody. How do you teach paralinguistic features like stress and intonation, things like that? What do you think, everybody? How do you teach that? I know that I used to have my students simply underline the part of the word that was stressed or that had a little bit of an accent, even though we don't show the accent in writing, and then they would practice. Juan says I would use a rubber band to make them notice the differences. Great. Beatrice says modeling. Musical tools like kazoos and clapping, those are always fun. Choral drills from Katerine, facial expressions from Shamila. Great. Chants, rhymes, and tapping, absolutely. Repeating exercises and drills. And shadow reading after listening. Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Great ideas.
Yeah, those are great ideas. So now we're going to talk about one of ours.
So first, another quote for you. This is attributed to Mae West, but it comes from lots of different places too. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. So there's a lot of meaning that is that can be communicated besides the actual words.
And so to show our students how that works, we use an activity that we call blank scenes. So blank scenes, which are also sometimes called contentless scenes, are scripts with vague text that can be interpreted multiple ways. They're used to demonstrate the importance of the paralinguistic features of language, like intonation, volume, body language, etc.
So in this text, we're not providing any information besides very, very simple things. Students will make choices about who they are, their character, where they are, the setting, what's happening, the plot, and any conflict that the character or tension in the scene. Then they are performed, and the audience, which in this context is just the other students in the class, will try to guess what choices the speakers made based on their paralinguistic features of language.
So this is easier to understand with an example. So here's an example of a blank scene that Derek and I wrote. And we're going to read it for you, but in a very neutral way. We're going to provide no context. We're not going to use very many features to enhance the meaning of it. And so we'll read it and see what you think.
This is my thing.
No.
Yes.
It's always your thing.
Should I even mention?
Okay. Yes. Okay. This is your thing. I feel like one of those computer recorded voices. So there's not a lot to take from that, right? We're not using many paralinguistic features to add meaning, so it remains vague. Now we'd like you to be creative and help us out. So what we would like is for you to put some ideas in the chat that will help us add some meaning to this scene. What are your ideas about who those characters in the scene might be, and what is their relationship to each other?
Yeah, let us know who are those characters do you think in the scene? I just saw one, brother and sister. We have another one from Melanie, siblings. What else do you think? What other relationships could be represented here? Shamela also says siblings. Roxana says two sisters fighting. Mika and Michaela, maybe those are brother and sister, named after their father or something. The language house says husband and wife. They may be a couple from Marcel, or they might be friends. So what do you think, Derek and Carmela?
What do you want to do?
Well, it looks like siblings has been pretty popular, so maybe we should make them siblings.
Sounds good.
Okay. So with just that one little bit of information, let's see what might change there. This is my thing.
No.
Yes.
It's always your thing.
Should I even mention?
Okay. Yes. Okay. This is your thing. Okay, so you can see how that changes quite a bit just from having a little bit of information to work with.
So then we might make choices about beyond relationship. What is the context? What is the thing? What are the words that we are thinking, but we're not actually speaking? And then how does that impact our tempo, our rhythm, the way that we speak? What do we stress? Our body language. And each time we can interact with the people that are watching. And it's a really creative, fun thing for people to do, to take this bit of text and see how each group comes up with something different. We are bank robbers. We are on the moon. We are, all these possibilities. So you can ask your students to supply these conditions for the two performers. And you can take time to unpack how these choices impacted their speech, and keep trying things different ways.
Yeah, and talk about how things changed, how different groups communicated a different idea with the same text. So here are some tips for using these in your classroom. To adapt this activity to your classroom, you could write your own blank scenes that would work for your students' needs and levels. If you want to practice certain vocabulary or pronunciation or grammar features, you could put them into your script. So notice in ours how the two TH, the th and the sounds are in that script, because Our students at the time needed to work on the pronunciation of those sounds, for example. You might want to also focus on particular paralinguistic features you want your students to practice. For example, my students often need work on intonation patterns, so this is a great way to practice those.
So with any of these activities, you want to consider your context and who your students are and what their needs are, but they are easily adapted. Organize this task according to the time that you have. Can all the students perform, or should you just have one group demonstrate, or perhaps break into smaller groups so that everyone can participate? Another idea is, if you have multi-level classes, choose who performs and who observes to provide support for lower level students and more opportunities for higher level students. For example, lower level students might benefit from being coached by others when performing, or higher level students could even be asked to write some of the scenes for others to perform.
With large classes, perhaps assign some of the preparation for homework, or have students work in small groups. Keep track of who performs in each class to ensure that all students are trying different roles in subsequent sessions. In online classes, make use of the tools available. For example, students can use the chat feature to make suggestions, just like you did today. Use the organization of the screen to set an order for turn taking. Use breakout rooms for students to discuss and practice before performing. There are lots of different things you can do. We find also, when it comes to assessment, that formative or informal assessment is best for these kinds of activities. Give students feedback, help them improve in the moment, but don't necessarily assign a grade to their performance. Once something becomes tied to a formal exam or a test, the motivation to take risks will be reduced. So these activities are language building and will help students do better on formal exams when the time comes for that kind of assessment.
So let's see what we have accomplished today. We have explored the benefits of performance activities in the language classroom. We've played some theater games that can be used for student confidence and motivation. And we have done some improv activities for authentic language use. And then finally, we explored blank scenes for creative expression and paralinguistic communication.
So now we have one last question for you. Now that you know more about using drama-based teaching, do you feel that this approach could be incorporated into what you are already doing in your classroom? Please share your responses with us.
Yeah, let us know, everyone. Do you think you could use this approach in your classroom? And we already have some great ideas and comments. I'll definitely use these activities in my classroom, from Sidra. Fernando says for sure. And we have 2 comments from Hussein, which are very fun. Hussein wrote, OMG, 1 hour has passed already. Too much fun. Wonderful. And also, thank you so much for all your beautiful efforts and clear and funny demonstrations. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Loveline says, I love one-word stories. They boost the learner's creative juices. Great. Beatrice says, I can use all of these ideas. Many other people are saying yes. Shamela says, big yes. Jasam says, yes. Kutipa says, of course, very useful. Karen says, yes, for sure. Sandra says, yes, it is very useful. Wonderful. Thanks, everyone, for those great comments.
Yes, thanks so much for those wonderful comments. So really, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are many more ways to incorporate theater games, improv, blank scenes, and other acting techniques into the language classroom. We've included resources for you to explore this topic further. We encourage you to embrace the idea of yes and let students make more choices and use authentic language that is relevant to their lives. Think about ways you can adapt these games to your students' needs and interests. And thanks so much for participating with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Derek and Carmela. That was a wonderful presentation. One more nice comment from Fernando. Amazing webinar. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and time with us. Lots of very useful ideas. So thank you so, so much.